The scan glowed blood red in the darkened room, a death sentence rendered in pixels and lies. Paulina Stan had exactly 147 days to live, or so they said. But the real countdown had already begun, not to her death, but to the moment when everything she believed about medicine, trust, and survival would shatter like glass. What happens next will make you question every doctor's appointment you've ever had. Don't click away. This woman's fight for survival just saved thousands of lives, and you need to hear how she did it. Dr. Benjamin Foster's office smelled of leather and lavender, expensive scents designed to soften terrible news. The crimson bloom on the brain scan dominated his monitor, a grotesque flower spreading its petals across gray matter. Paulina watched his practiced expression, the way his eyebrows drew together in rehearsed sympathy, the slight downturn of his mouth that probably looked the same for every patient he condemned. "Stage 4 glioblastoma," he said, his voice carrying the weight of professional gravity. "Aggressive, advanced. I'm afraid we're looking at approximately 5 months without intervention." 5 months. Paulina's hands gripped the armrests of the consultation chair. 67 years of life, reduced to a number that wouldn't carry her through spring. Behind Dr. Foster, Nurse Patricia Green stood like a statue, her face arranged in that peculiar expression of distant concern that healthcare workers perfect over decades, close enough to seem human, far enough to remain untouched. "However," Dr. Foster continued, leaning forward with what might have been hope or might have been something else entirely, "there's a new treatment, Nexaparin 7. Experimental, yes, but we've seen remarkable results. It could give you time, real time." "How much time?" Paulina's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "Perhaps 2 years, maybe more." He slid a document across his desk. "The treatment costs $40,000. Not covered by insurance yet. Too new. But Mrs. Stan, this could save your life." $40,000. The exact amount sitting in her savings account. 35 years of careful accumulation at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, where she'd started as a basement file clerk and climbed to research coordinator through sheer determination and weekend shifts. Every penny represented a sacrifice. Packed lunches, bus fare instead of taxis. One winter coat stretched across 5 years. She'd been saving for Ireland, for the green hills her grandmother had described with tears in her eyes during those final hospice days. Robert had always promised they'd go together, but then his heart had given out 15 years ago in their kitchen, leaving her with memories and an empty house in Oak Valley District. Ireland could wait. She needed to live first. "I'll do it," she said. The first treatment began 2 days later. They pumped the golden liquid into her veins while she sat in a room with 5 other patients, all of them connected to IV poles, like prisoners chained to hope. Within hours, the nausea hit, a rolling, relentless assault that left her hollow. Her body weakened. Her reflection became unrecognizable. Each morning she woke alone in her small house, wondering if this was the day she'd be too weak to rise. No children to call, no siblings to comfort her. The few friends from work had drifted away over the years, their lives full of grandchildren and garden parties, while Paulina filed reports and dreamed of distant shores. Death would find her as life had, quietly, in the spaces between other people's noise. She swallowed another anti-nausea pill and returned to the treatment chair, week after week, watching her savings evaporate and her body deteriorate, trusting that the poison flowing through her veins was somehow less deadly than the disease it claimed to fight. She had no reason to doubt them, none at all. Paulina just signed away her life savings to the very people who sentenced her to death. But she doesn't know that yet. Neither does anyone else. That's about to change, because 3 weeks from now, a therapist with a haunted past walks into her life. Keep watching. What Kelly Liam discovers will expose one of the deadliest conspiracies in medical history. Kelly Liam grew up in shoes held together with duct tape, eating hope for dinner when there was nothing else. She'd clawed her way out of the Bronzeville projects with student loans she'd be paying until she was 50. But that hunger, that bone-deep understanding of what it meant to be powerless, was about to become the weapon that brought down a pharmaceutical empire. This isn't just another feel-good story. This is about a woman who had every reason to mind her own business, and didn't. Subscribe now, because Kelly's about to make a choice that will cost her everything, and save everyone. The apartment building where Kelly grew up still stood on 37th Street, though she never visited. Some memories were better left in concrete and rust. Her grandmother had cleaned houses 6 days a week, coming home with knees that creaked like old doors and hands that smelled of bleach. Her mother had been there, then not there, lost to the pull of substances that promised escape from powerlessness. Kelly remembered nights of crackers and determination, her grandmother's voice insisting that education was the only way out, the only weapon they'd never be able to take away. She'd walk to school in those duct-taped shoes, refusing to be ashamed, turning humiliation into fuel. The full scholarship to state had been her salvation, but it only covered tuition. The rest, books, housing, food, survival, came from loans that would shadow her until she was 50. Her master's in clinical psychology had been her ticket out, earned through midnight shifts at diners and borrowed textbooks. At 32, newly licensed, she had everything to prove, and a small office at Riverside Therapeutic Services to prove it in. The insurance company called them mandated grief counseling sessions, 6 visits to help terminal patients process their impending deaths. Grief management, end-of-life adjustment, pretty words for teaching people how to die quietly. Paulina Stan arrived 14 minutes early for their first session, sitting rigid in the waiting room like she was afraid relaxation might hasten death. Kelly noticed the weight loss first, then the pallor, the way Paulina's clothes hung loose on a frame that had recently been fuller. The woman who entered her office moved like someone already half gone. The lighting in Kelly's space was warm, the couch deliberately soft, false comfort for the dying, but comfort nonetheless. Paulina perched on its edge, hands folded, eyes distant. "Tell me about yourself," Kelly said gently. The story emerged in careful, controlled sentences. 35 years at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The diagnosis. Dr. Foster's Crimson Scan. The treatment that cost everything and delivered only nausea and decline. Dreams of Ireland dissolved into reality of decay. Kelly listened with practiced empathy, her training a steady hand on her reactions. Listen, support, don't intervene. Help them accept. Help them let go. But something felt wrong. A discordant note humming beneath Paulina's resignation. "This disease," Kelly said slowly. "Neurodegenerative encephalopathy syndrome. Did you have exposure to experimental compounds at Meridian? Environmental factors?" Paulina blinked. "I filed reports. I didn't work in the labs." "But you were there. 35 years of proximity to research facilities. They said it was genetic, spontaneous cellular mutation." Paulina recited the words like liturgy. Kelly nodded, made notes, guided the conversation toward acceptance and peace. But after Paulina left, after the office door clicked shut and silence reclaimed the room, Kelly opened her laptop. Neurodegenerative encephalopathy syndrome. She searched academic databases, medical journals, patient advocacy groups. The information was sparse, remarkably sparse for a disease severe enough to warrant $40,000 treatments. Mostly pharmaceutical press releases. Clinical trial announcements. Marketing materials dressed in medical language. No real patient outcome data, no longitudinal studies, no independent research outside Meridian's own publications. She searched deeper. Patient forums, support groups, survivor stories. Nothing. Silence where there should have been noise. Absence where there should have been community. Kelly sat back, her grandmother's voice echoing across decades. "When something doesn't make sense, baby, it's because someone's lying." Her instinct, honed in Bronzeville, where survival meant reading danger in silence and absence, screamed one truth. Something was very, very wrong. Kelly just stumbled onto something that should have stayed buried. The clock is ticking. Not on Paulina's life, but on Kelly's safety. Because asking the wrong questions about Meridian Pharmaceuticals? That's how people end up with terminal diagnoses. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't believe what she uncovers in the next 72 hours. 4 people, 4 terminal diagnoses, 4 expensive treatments, all former Meridian employees, all dying right on schedule. Coincidence? Kelly didn't think so. But proving it meant digging into files she had no right to access, asking questions that could end her career, and trusting an instinct that whispered, "They're killing people in plain sight." Before you scroll past this, know this. What Kelly discovers in the next 3 minutes of this story has already changed medical protocols nationwide. But back then, she was alone, terrified, and about to cross a line she could never uncross. Stay with me. Kelly stayed late at Riverside on a Thursday evening. The office empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights and her guilty conscience. The patient database glowed on her screen. Files she had legitimate access to, searches she had no legitimate reason to perform. She told herself she was looking for patterns, for ways to better serve her clients. She told herself a lot of lies that night. Neurodegenerative encephalopathy syndrome. She ran the search. 4 names appeared. Raymond Kowalski, 61. Research technician at Meridian Pharmaceuticals for 28 years. Diagnosed 7 months ago. Currently in treatment. Linda Petrova, 58. Quality control supervisor at Meridian for 19 years. Diagnosed 5 months ago. Currently in treatment. Gregory Atkins, 64. Lab coordinator at Meridian for 32 years. Diagnosed 11 months ago. Deceased 4 weeks after treatment completion. Paulina Stan, 67. Research coordinator at Meridian for 35 years. Diagnosed 2 months ago. Currently in treatment. Kelly's hands trembled on the keyboard. 4 people. 1 company. 1 rare disease. She dug deeper, crossing ethical lines with each click. The attending physicians, Dr. Benjamin Foster, had diagnosed 3 of them. Dr. Miranda Hollis had diagnosed Raymond. Both doctors operated within the same hospital network. Both had pharmaceutical consulting agreements listed in their public disclosures. Both prescribed Nexaparin 7 exclusively for NES treatment. The treatment costs ranged from $35,000 to $50,000, precisely the range that would devastate but not bankrupt a middle-class retiree. Life savings territory. Desperation money. Kelly sat back, nausea rising. She was a therapist with 18 months of independent practice. She had a master's degree in listening, not medicine. She had no training to challenge diagnoses, no standing to question oncologists and neurologists with decades of experience. What she had was an instinct honed in Bronzeville, where she'd learned that predators always hunted the vulnerable and that institutions protected themselves first. She could lose her license for this. Patient confidentiality violations, overstepping professional boundaries, practicing outside her scope. The ethics board would destroy her, and the student loans would still be there, waiting, permanent as gravestones. But Paulina was dying. Kelly watched it happen weekly in 50-minute increments. The tremor in Paulina's hands had worsened. A constant shake that made lifting coffee cups an ordeal. 15 pounds had melted away in 3 weeks, leaving skin draped over bones like loose fabric. Her face had gone gray, the color of old concrete, and her eyes had that hollow look Kelly recognized from her mother's final days. The look of someone who'd already let go. Their next session arrived with autumn rain. Paulina entered slowly, lowering herself onto the couch with the care of someone whose body had become an enemy. "I'm stopping treatment," Paulina said quietly. "I told Dr. Foster yesterday." Kelly's pen stilled. "Can I ask why?" "Because the cure is killing me faster than the disease." Paulina's voice was matter-of-fact, resigned. "I can't eat. I can't sleep. I'm weak all the time." "What's the point of buying time if the time I'm buying isn't worth living?" The moment crystallized. Kelly could nod sympathetically, help Paulina process acceptance, write up the session notes, and collect her fee. Professional, appropriate, safe. Or she could jump. "Before you stop," Kelly said carefully, "have you considered a second opinion?" Paulina blinked. "A second opinion?" "A diagnostic review from a physician outside Dr. Foster's network." Kelly kept her voice steady, professional, even as her career crumbled beneath her words. "To rule out every alternative before you give up." "Why would I do that?" Genuine confusion crossed Paulina's face. "Dr. Foster showed me the scans. I saw the tumor." "Scans can be misread. Diagnoses can be wrong." Kelly leaned forward. "Paulina, you've worked in pharmaceutical research for 35 years. You know how careful medical science demands we be. Wouldn't you want absolute certainty?" Something flickered in Paulina's hollow eyes. Not hope. Hope was too dangerous, but something like curiosity, like the tiniest question mark in a sea of periods. Kelly just committed professional suicide. If she's wrong, her career is over. If she's right, the people she's investigating have already killed at least one person, Gregory Atkins, and they have no idea she's coming for them. Yet. Subscribe now, because the next chapter reveals the diagnosis that changes everything. Dr. Nathan Pierce looked at the brain scans for exactly 47 seconds before his face went pale. "This isn't NES," he said quietly. "This is murder." And in that moment, in a cluttered office at County General Hospital, Kelly Liam realized she wasn't investigating medical malpractice. She was hunting killers in white coats. Listen carefully. If you or anyone you know has been diagnosed with a rare terminal disease and pushed toward expensive experimental treatment, especially if you worked for a pharmaceutical company, do not click away from this video. What comes next could literally save your life. I'm not exaggerating. Nathan Pierce was 45, brilliant, and chronically disheveled in the way of people who forgot to eat when focused on problems more interesting than food. His office at County General looked like a library had exploded, journals stacked on every surface, coffee cups in various stages of abandonment, a dying ficus in the corner that he watered with good intentions and no consistency. Kelly had met him years ago during a stroke patient's therapy coordination, and they'd built a friendship on mutual respect and truly terrible hospital coffee. "You're asking me to risk my reputation?" he'd said when she first approached him. "Based on your gut feeling about pharmaceutical conspiracy?" "Yes." He'd studied her for a long moment. "You once sat with my mother for 3 hours when I was stuck in emergency surgery, held her hand, kept her calm." A pause. "I'll do it. But Kelly, if you're wrong, I know." The week of testing had been comprehensive. MRIs with contrast, complete blood work panels, cognitive assessments, genetic testing. Every diagnostic tool Nathan could justify. Every test Meridian's doctors should have performed but apparently hadn't. He'd called in specialist colleagues, trading favors and owing lunches, building a diagnostic picture from every angle. Now they sat in a small conference room, Paulina, Kelly, and Nathan, with scan images projected on the wall and file folders spread across the table. Paulina's hands shook as she gripped her chair. She'd lost another 3 pounds since agreeing to this evaluation. Hope, Kelly had learned, was sometimes heavier than resignation. Nathan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Stan, you don't have neurodegenerative encephalopathy syndrome." The words hung in sterile air. "What?" Paulina's voice was barely audible. "You don't have a terminal brain disease. Your actual diagnosis is severe vitamin B12 deficiency combined with hypothyroidism, both completely treatable with common, inexpensive medications." Nathan pulled up comparison scans. "Your symptoms match NES superficially. Headaches, confusion, memory problems, cognitive decline. But the scan patterns are entirely different. Any competent neurologist would have caught this immediately. Paulina stared at him. "So I'm not dying?" Her voice broke on the last word, and then she was sobbing. Great, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deeper than lungs. Kelly moved instinctively, arms around Paulina's shaking shoulders, while the woman collapsed into the reality of life reclaimed. The sobs were relief and rage tangled together, joy and fury fighting for dominance. "I'm not dying," Paulina repeated through tears. "I'm not dying." But underneath the relief, Kelly watched something else crystallize in Paulina's expression. The whiplash from accepting death to reclaiming life left room for a third emotion: burning, focused fury. "Someone did this deliberately," Paulina said, her voice hardening through the tears. "Someone took my $40,000. Someone sentenced me to death for profit." Nathan leaned forward, his expression grave. "Mrs. Stan, I need you to understand something. This wasn't a missed diagnosis. This wasn't negligence. Every physician involved would have had to be either catastrophically incompetent or deliberately deceptive. The tests they ran, the scans they showed you, the treatment protocol they recommended, every single step had to be either fabricated or willfully misinterpreted." Kelly's chest tightened. "Nathan, there are 3 other patients. Same diagnosis, same doctors, same treatment, same pharmaceutical company employment history." Nathan's face went carefully blank. "You're telling me there's a pattern?" "I'm telling you it's too perfect to be coincidence." He was quiet for a long moment. "Get me their names. I'll examine them, pro bono if necessary." His jaw set. "Because if what you're suggesting is true, if Meridian is systematically targeting their own former employees with false diagnoses to sell expensive fake treatments." He stopped, searching for words adequate to the horror. "That's not medical malpractice. That's organized murder." Paulina looked up, tears still wet on her gray face. "How many people has Gregory Atkins already died?" The question settled like lead. Paulina just got her life back. But Gregory Atkins? He's dead. Linda and Raymond? Still dying from treatments they don't need. And Meridian Pharmaceuticals? They have no idea their perfect murder scheme is about to collapse. But here's what's terrifying. Paulina might not be the target. She might be collateral damage. The real reason behind these murders? Subscribe now, or you'll miss the twist that makes this story truly chilling. Paulina Stan had seen something 2 years ago. Something in the clinical trial data that didn't add up. She'd reported it. They'd called it an administrative error. And now she understood. That's when they marked her for death. Because Meridian Pharmaceuticals didn't just kill to make money. They killed to bury evidence. And Paulina knew where the bodies were buried. What Paulina stumbled across in those files should have been impossible. Drug companies don't do this. It's too risky, too evil, too... Except they did. And they've been doing it for 5 years. Keep watching. The conspiracy goes deeper than murder. Nathan Pierce worked fast. Within 2 weeks, both Raymond Kowalski and Linda Petrova sat in his office at County General, receiving diagnoses that should have filled them with relief, but instead ignited rage. Raymond Kowalski didn't have a terminal brain disease. He had Lyme disease with neurological symptoms, treatable with antibiotics and anti-inflammatory protocols. The confusion, the tremors, the cognitive decline that had convinced him death was imminent? All reversible. He'd spent $37,000 on Nexaparin 7 treatments that were actively poisoning him. Linda Petrova's terminal encephalopathy was actually vitamin deficiencies compounded by early-stage dementia. Manageable, treatable, not a death sentence. She'd liquidated her retirement account, $42,000, to pay for treatments that accelerated her decline instead of slowing it. Both were alive. Both were furious. Both wanted answers. Kelly stood in the back of Gregory Atkins' memorial service on a gray November morning, watching his widow accept condolences with the exhausted dignity of someone who'd watched her husband die by inches. 2 adult children flanked her, their faces carved with grief. The eulogy praised Gregory's 32 years of dedication to pharmaceutical research, his meticulous nature, his commitment to safety protocols. Kelly's hands clenched in her coat pockets. He might still be alive. The thought was a scream she couldn't release. Not here. Not without proof. Circumstantial evidence wouldn't resurrect the dead or comfort his family. It would only sound like the ravings of a conspiracy theorist with delusions of importance. She left before the burial, unable to watch them lower a man into ground when his death might have been murder. 3 days later, Kelly sat in a coffee shop across from Paulina, Raymond, and Linda. The victims, except they weren't victims anymore. They were survivors, and survivors got angry. "There has to be something that connects us," Kelly said. "Beyond Meridian employment, beyond the same doctors. What did you all have in common?" Paulina stared into her tea, her color returned now, her hands steady on cheap medication that cost $17 a month. "I reported something," she said quietly. 2 years ago. Clinical trial data for Nexaparin 7 that didn't match the published results. Patient outcomes were different, worse, than what they submitted to the FDA. I filed an internal report. They called it an administrative error, thanked me for my diligence, and told me it was corrected. Raymond's cup froze halfway to his mouth. "I filed a safety complaint 18 months ago. Lab protocol violations in the testing facility, contaminated samples that should have invalidated results but were being used anyway." Linda's voice was barely audible. "I documented contamination in the manufacturing process, clean room breaches. I reported it to my supervisor. They said they'd handle it. That was 20 months ago." The coffee shop noise faded to white static. Kelly's training, her years of learning to read subtext and recognize patterns in human behavior, crystallized into a single, horrifying realization. "You're not random targets," she said. "You're whistleblowers. All of you saw problems with drugs. Meridian was trying to get approved. All of you reported those problems through proper channels. And instead of fixing the issues, they silenced you." "With terminal diagnoses," Paulina finished, her voice hard. "We weren't supposed to talk because we were supposed to be dead, or too sick to be credible. Who questions a dying person's complaints? Who investigates accusations from someone with brain damage?" "Legacy protocol," Raymond said bitterly. "That's what they probably call it internally. Clean up loose ends, make problems disappear, and it looks completely natural. Retired employees developing late-life diseases. No investigation. No questions." Kelly leaned forward. "We need proof. Real proof. Documentation from inside Meridian that connects your reports to your diagnoses. Financial records showing who profited. Communication between the doctors and the company." Paulina met her eyes. "I still have retired employee access. They never revoked my credentials. Why would they? I was supposed to be dead by now." Something sharp glinted in her expression. "There's an annual retiree luncheon in 3 weeks. I could get into the building, into the system." "That's insane," Linda said. "If they realize you're alive and healthy, they'll know someone's investigating," Paulina finished. "But Gregory Atkins is dead. How many others are there that we haven't found? How many more are they planning?" She looked at Kelly. "I'm going in. Tell me what we need." Paulina is about to walk back into the building where they planned her murder. If they realize she's alive and healthy? If they figure out what she's looking for? Gregory Atkins wasn't the first victim. He was just the first one Kelly found. Subscribe and keep watching. What happened next is the heist that exposes everything. And trust me, it doesn't go according to plan. The tablet hidden in Paulina Stan's purse contained software that could clone an entire server in under 3 minutes. She had rehearsed the plan 17 times. She knew which terminal room had the loosest security. She knew the guard rotation schedule. What she didn't know was that someone at Meridian was expecting her. Not her specifically, but someone like her. Someone who'd figured it out. The next 7 minutes of this story happen in real time. Paulina has one shot at this. If she's caught, it's over. And not just the investigation. People who cross Meridian don't just lose their jobs, they lose their lives. Stay with me. Every second counts. Vincent Hale looked like someone who'd spent 15 years sleeping poorly and trusting no one, which he had. At 40, the investigative journalist carried the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many powerful people escape consequences. His apartment walls were covered in flowcharts and exposed corruption that never quite resulted in indictments. Big pharma conspiracy theories are everywhere, he'd said when Kelly first approached him. Everyone thinks their aunt's cancer treatment was suppressed, or their uncle was poisoned by statins. Then Kelly showed him the evidence. 4 victims, same pattern, same company, clinical data that disappeared under scrutiny. Vincent's skepticism crumbled like wet paper. If this is real, it's RICO, federal racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. He'd leaned back, processing. I have a source inside Meridian. Mid-level executive with a guilty conscience and a mortgage. Won't testify, can't afford to lose the job, but might help us access files. He'd pulled out a tablet, sleek and innocuous. This will clone their entire archive in under 3 minutes. But someone has to get inside. Paulina had volunteered before he finished explaining. Now she stood in the lobby of Meridian headquarters, a monument to pharmaceutical success, rendered in gleaming glass and steel. 35 years she'd walked through these doors. Today felt like visiting the scene of her own attempted murder. The atrium buzzed with the annual retiree luncheon, former colleagues navigating buffet tables and forced nostalgia. Several people didn't recognize her initially. The last time they'd seen her, she was dying, gray, skeletal, hollow-eyed. Now she stood healthy, color returned, 20 pounds heavier. "Paulina!" Martha from accounting grabbed her arm. "You look wonderful. We heard about your diagnosis. I'm so glad to see your—" She faltered, clearly unsure how to finish. "Still fighting," Paulina said with a smile that felt like poison on her lips. These people didn't know. Most of them were innocent. But somewhere in this building, someone had signed her death warrant. She excused herself after 15 minutes of small talk that tasted like ashes. "Restroom," she murmured, heading instead toward the service elevator. In her ear, Kelly's voice was barely audible. "I'm here. I've got you." "Heading up now," Paulina whispered, pressing the button for the 5th floor. The elevator climbed. Ambient sounds filtered through the earpiece, keyboards clicking, air conditioning humming, muted conversations from distant offices. The archives occupied a forgotten corner of the building, filled with outdated terminals and legacy files that hadn't been digitized. This was where institutional memory lived and died. The terminal room was dusty, exactly as she remembered. Ancient computers that predated cloud storage, running systems that younger employees wouldn't recognize. She logged in using credentials that should have been revoked months ago, when she was supposed to be too sick to care. Her username worked. Password accepted. "I'm in," she breathed. The folder structure was familiar. She'd navigated these directories for decades. But now she searched with purpose, following Vincent's instructions. There, buried 3 levels deep. Legacy Protocol, confidential. Her hands trembled on the mouse. Click. A spreadsheet opened. 37 names arranged in neat rows. Dates, diagnoses, status updates. Gregory Atkins was number 23. His status marked Resolved, Natural Causes. Her own name sat at row 31. In progress, 63% completion. Linda Petrova, In progress, 41% completion. Raymond Kowalski. In progress, 38% completion. 5 years of systematic murder, quantified and tracked like sales metrics. She inserted the tablet, initiated the clone. Next folder. Nexaparin 7 clinical trials. The data loaded, and there it was. Control group outcomes manually altered. Real results showing the drug was not just ineffective, but potentially harmful. Falsified data submitted to FDA approval. Internal memos with the CEO's digital signature approving the fabrication, and her own memo from 2 years ago, flagged in red. Priority elimination, knows trial discrepancies. "Kelly, I have everything," she whispered, downloading files. "The clinical data is falsified. The kill list is real. They've murdered." Footsteps. Close. Getting closer. "Someone's coming." She yanked the earpiece out, shoved it in her pocket. The download bar crawled. 82%. 85. The footsteps stopped outside the door. In the parking garage, Kelly sat frozen, her phone pressed to her ear, hearing only silence. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was useless here, unable to help, unable to intervene. The seconds stretched into minutes. 5 minutes of silence. 10. 15. Paulina was alone in there, surrounded by people who'd killed 37 times, holding evidence that could destroy them all. If she made it out, Kelly just lost contact with Paulina inside Meridian. She's alone, exposed, surrounded by people who've killed 37 times. And she has evidence that could send the entire executive team to prison for life. If she makes it out. Subscribe now. Because what happens next determines whether justice wins or becomes victim number 38. Dr. Benjamin Foster thought he'd seen the last of Paulina Stan 3 months ago. A dying woman accepting her fate. So when she walked into his office very much alive, very healthy, and very angry, his first instinct was denial. His second was panic. His third was calculation. How much does she know, and how do I survive this? What you're about to witness is a masterclass in confrontation. Paulina is about to give a doctor who sentenced her to death one chance at redemption. One chance to betray the people who turned him into a killer. Stay subscribed. This is where villains choose between conscience and cover-up. The connection crackled back to life in Kelly's ear. "I'm out. I have it. Everything." Paulina's voice was breathless but steady. She'd hidden in a supply closet when those footsteps approached, pressing herself against shelving units while a security guard passed without glancing inside. The tablet had finished downloading. She'd wiped the access logs, erasing her digital footprints, then walked out during the luncheon dismissal, blending into the crowd of retirees heading toward parking lots and memories. Kelly nearly collapsed with relief in the parking garage, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. 2 weeks later, Vincent's apartment had transformed into a war room. Coffee cups multiplied on every surface. The three of them, Kelly, Paulina, Vincent, parsed through data until their eyes burned, cross-referencing, verifying, building an unassailable case. The legacy protocol documentation was comprehensive, almost proud in its detail. 37 targeted former employees. All had witnessed regulatory violations, falsified data, contaminated samples, safety protocol breaches. All had filed complaints or reports through proper channels. All subsequently diagnosed with rare, difficult-to-verify terminal conditions. All prescribed Meridian's expensive experimental drugs. Average survival, 8 to 14 months post-diagnosis. Total profit from treatments, $1.4 million. Hidden benefit, whistleblowers silenced permanently, evidence buried with bodies. Gregory Atkins was dead. 22 others were already dead. 14 were still living but in treatment, their bodies deteriorating from poisons disguised as cures. "We need a witness," Vincent said on day 12, rubbing exhausted eyes. "Someone inside who'll testify. Documentation is damning, But juries trust people over papers. His source wouldn't do it. Too scared, too much to lose. That left only one option. Flip one of the doctors. Dr. Benjamin Foster had diagnosed 19 victims. Dr. Miranda Hollis had diagnosed 11. Both knew exactly what they were doing. Both had turned their medical degrees into weapons. But Foster seemed different, conflicted. Paulina remembered something in his eyes during her diagnosis, a flicker of something that might have been guilt or might have been fear, a hesitation, barely perceptible, before he delivered her death sentence. He was the weak link. "I'll do it," Paulina said. "I'll confront him." The concealed recording device fit under Paulina's blouse, invisible and illegal. They were past caring about misdemeanors. Paulina was surprisingly calm, her rage focused into something sharp and precise. She'd been dead before, had accepted death and made peace with oblivion. What was left to fear? She walked into Foster's office without an appointment. The receptionist's face registered shock, then confusion, then forced cheerfulness. "Mrs. Stan, I'm so glad to see you looking better." The lie lived in that cheerful voice, in the surprise that Paulina was still breathing. Foster's nameplate gleamed on his door. Paulina didn't knock. She entered like she owned the space, which, in a way, she did. She'd paid $40,000 for this confrontation. Dr. Foster looked up from his computer, his practiced sympathy already arranging itself on his face. "Mrs. Stan, I wasn't expecting to see you. How are you feeling?" "Alive, which must be surprising given that you diagnosed me with a terminal illness I never had." The silence was absolute. In the surveillance van parked outside, Kelly held her breath. "I don't understand." Foster's voice was careful, controlled. "Your scans clearly showed." "My scans showed vitamin deficiency and thyroid problems, both completely treatable. Both wildly different from neurodegenerative encephalopathy syndrome, as you well know, Dr. Foster." He tried deflection. "You're confused. Terminal diagnoses can be emotionally—" "I'm angry." Paulina's voice cut through his words like surgical steel. "You sentenced me to death. You took my retirement savings, and you did it deliberately, on behalf of Meridian Pharmaceuticals, as part of a program to silence former employees who witnessed your crimes." Something crashed, glass or ceramic hitting the floor. When Foster spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder, calculating. The mask dropped. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof?" Paulina opened her folder. "Clinical trial data showing Nexaparin 7 is not only ineffective but harmful. FDA submissions with manually altered control group outcomes. Legacy protocol documentation listing 37 names, including mine. Internal memos flagging whistleblowers for priority elimination. And Gregory Atkins, remember him? The man you murdered with your misdiagnosis?" Foster was silent. "Everything we're discussing is being recorded," Paulina continued. "You have one chance to do the right thing, Doctor. Testify against Meridian, cooperate fully with federal investigators, or stay loyal to the people who turned you into a killer. And when this all comes out, and it will, you'll face the full consequences alone." The silence stretched so long Kelly thought he'd left the room. Finally, his voice came through the speaker, hollow and defeated. "What do you want me to do?" Dr. Foster just broke. One of Meridian's killers is about to become their destroyer. But here's what nobody realizes yet. Not Foster, not Meridian, not even Kelly. This conspiracy goes beyond one pharmaceutical company. It reaches into the FDA, insurance companies, medical boards. Exposing Meridian is just the beginning. Subscribe now. The next thing is the trial that changed medicine forever. The FBI raid on Meridian Pharmaceuticals headquarters began at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. 43 agents, 16 search warrants, and one terrified whistleblower doctor wearing a wire. By noon, the CEO was in handcuffs. By evening, the scandal was national news. By the end of the week, a pharmaceutical empire built on murder had collapsed into ruins. And Paulina Stan was standing in the ashes, planning what would rise from them. What happens in the next 8 minutes doesn't just end one story, it starts a movement. Paulina and Kelly are about to transform from survivors into revolutionaries. And if you've ever felt powerless against systems that don't care about you, stay with me. Dr. Benjamin Foster wore the wire for 3 weeks, his hands trembling every time he entered Meridian's executive suite. The FBI needed corroboration, needed voices beyond documents, needed the conspirators to incriminate themselves in real time. Foster delivered. "You need to accelerate the Kowalski case," CEO Daniel Westbrook said during a Tuesday meeting, his voice casual as discussing quarterly projections. "He's asking too many questions. His daughter's a lawyer. We can't afford complications." CFO Patricia Monroe nodded, scrolling through her tablet. "Legacy protocol has been remarkably cost-effective. I'm recommending we expand targeting to include lab technicians. Broader pool, same vulnerabilities." Every word was recorded. Every callous calculation preserved digitally. Foster's recordings corroborated Paulina's stolen documents perfectly. 2 independent sources creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. The FBI built their RICO case with the precision of surgeons and the fury of executioners. The raid came swift and merciless. Federal agents swarmed Meridian headquarters at dawn, badges gleaming, search warrants deployed like weapons. Servers were seized, offices locked down, executives pulled from morning meetings and placed in handcuffs before colleagues who'd never questioned where profits came from. Daniel Westbrook, CEO, Patricia Monroe, CFO, Richard Clark, Chief Medical Officer, all arrested within the first hour. Dr. Miranda Hollis was taken from her home in suburban comfort, her neighbors watching through drawn curtains as federal agents walked her to unmarked cars. 14 other doctors were implicated, their medical licenses suspended pending investigation. Even FDA officials found themselves under scrutiny for approving fraudulent trial data without adequate verification. The story broke everywhere simultaneously. The New York Times led with "Pharmaceutical Giant Accused of Systematic Murder for Profit." The Washington Post detailed the victims. CNN ran 24-hour coverage with legal experts dissecting the RICO implications. Vincent's article in The Atlantic became the definitive exposé. The Legacy Protocol: How Meridian Pharmaceuticals Turned Medicine into Murder. He laid it out methodically. 37 victims, $1.4 million in profit, 5 years of systematic elimination. Names, faces, stories of people who'd tried to do the right thing and been sentenced to death for their integrity. Public outrage was instantaneous and nationwide. Meridian's stock plummeted to zero within 48 hours. Insurance companies scrambled to distance themselves, issuing statements about enhanced oversight and patient protection. Legislators called for hearings. Medical boards promised reform. Kelly watched it unfold from her office at Riverside, tears streaming down her face as news anchors recited names she'd memorized. Gregory Atkins. 22 others who'd died believing their bodies had betrayed them, never knowing they'd been murdered. But also, 14 victims still alive, now stopping Nexaparin 7 and starting actual treatment. Raymond and Linda getting real care, reclaiming futures they'd written off as lost. Her phone rang. Paulina's name on the screen. "Turn on the news," Paulina said. "I'm about to speak." The courthouse steps were packed with reporters, cameras, microphones thrust forward like offerings. Paulina stood at the podium, stronger than Kelly had ever seen her, healthier, furious with crystallized purpose. "My name is Paulina Stan. I am a survivor of Meridian Pharmaceuticals' legacy protocol." Her voice carried across the crowd, steady and unbreakable. She detailed everything: the false diagnosis, the stolen savings, the acceptance of death, the systematic cruelty disguised as medicine. "They tried to silence me. They failed." Paulina's eyes blazed. "Truth is more powerful than any corporation. Justice will prevail, and I am here to ensure it does." Then she shifted, her expression softening into something like hope. "I'm announcing the formation of the Gregory Atkins Foundation, named for a man who should still be alive. Our mission is to provide free second opinion medical consultations for vulnerable patients facing terminal diagnoses. No one should ever face a terminal diagnosis alone. No one should ever have to trust blindly. We will be the safety net that catches those who fall through the cracks." She introduced the team. Dr. Nathan Pierce as Medical Director, Kelly Liam as Patient Advocacy Program Director, Vincent Hale leading investigative oversight. Funded by restitution settlements and private donations, the foundation would be operational within months. The trial began 8 months later. Kelly attended every day, sitting in the gallery beside Raymond and Linda, watching justice unfold in testimonies and evidence. Paulina testified for 6 hours, her voice never wavering. Families of deceased victims filled the courtroom, silent witnesses to murder disguised as medicine. The evidence was overwhelming. Foster's testimony, Paulina's documents, corporate emails discussing elimination targets, and cost-benefit analyses of whistleblower deaths. Financial records showing profit calculations that treated human lives as line items. The conspiracy reached the highest corporate levels, a rot that had infected an entire institution. From a woman accepting death in a dim office to a warrior standing on courthouse steps, changing medical history, Paulina Stan's transformation is complete. But here's the beautiful truth. This wasn't just her story. It was Kelly's. It was Gregory's. It was every person who refused to accept injustice. Subscribe now. Because the best part? They're still fighting, and they're winning. 2 years after the verdicts, the Gregory Atkins Foundation had saved 47 lives. 47 people who'd been told they were dying, who'd been pushed toward expensive treatments, who'd been ready to give up, discovered they could live. And every single one of them knew, if Kelly Liam hadn't trusted her instincts, if Paulina Stan hadn't fought back, they'd be grave statistics instead of living testimonials. What happened next is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of yours. Because what Kelly and Paulina did, you can do too. Not by infiltrating pharmaceutical companies, but by refusing to accept injustice wherever you see it. Stay until the end. I promise, the final 90 seconds will change how you see your own power to make a difference. The verdicts came down like hammers on anvils. All executives convicted. Fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. CEO Daniel Westbrook received 35 years in federal prison. CFO Patricia Monroe got 28. The Chief Medical Officer drew 25. Dr. Miranda Hollis, 18 years. Dr. Benjamin Foster, his sentence reduced for cooperation, served 3. 14 other doctors received sentences ranging from 2 to 12 years, their medical licenses permanently revoked. Meridian Pharmaceuticals was dissolved, its assets liquidated, $47 million distributed to victims' families in restitution. The money couldn't resurrect the dead, but it acknowledged their murders, gave their deaths legal weight and official recognition. The Gregory Atkins Foundation occupied a modest office in downtown Chicago, nothing gleaming or extravagant, just functional space dedicated to essential work. In 2 years, they'd provided over 3,000 free second opinion consultations. 47 misdiagnoses had been identified and corrected, some accidental medical errors, others potentially deliberate. The foundation had built a network of 340 volunteer physicians nationwide, doctors who donated time because they believed medicine should heal, not harm. Medical schools now taught the Meridian case in ethics courses. New protocols mandated second opinions for terminal diagnoses. Federal legislation was pending. The Atkins-Stan Patient Protection Act, designed to prevent pharmaceutical companies from ever again turning medicine into murder. Kelly was 34 now, working full-time as foundation director. She trained therapists and social workers nationwide in patient advocacy, teaching them to recognize patterns, trust instincts, question authority when something felt wrong. She'd finally found purpose that felt worthy of all those years of struggle, all those nights of crackers and determination. The foundation salary had allowed her to pay off half her student loans. She was dating Nathan Pierce, taking it slow, building something real on a foundation of shared values and terrible hospital coffee. Paulina was 69, healthy, vibrant, unstoppable. She'd finally visited Ireland, standing in County Cork with wind on her face, walking the land her grandmother had described through hospice tears. "Every moment is earned," she'd said, looking out over green hills. "None are wasted." She split her time between foundation work and travel, reclaiming all the years she'd spent preparing to die. Dr. Nathan Pierce served as medical director, coordinating the volunteer network, teaching at medical school, ethics and diagnostic rigor, the subjects Meridian's doctors had abandoned. He gave speaking engagements nationwide, his message simple: trust but verify, question but care, remember that patients are people, not profit margins. Vincent Hale won a Pulitzer Prize for his Atlantic article and donated the prize money to the foundation. He continued exposing pharmaceutical corruption, his new book, Legacy of Lies: The Meridian Murders, climbing bestseller lists, Justice Through Journalism, one exposed conspiracy at a time. Dr. Benjamin Foster had been released after 3 years. His medical license was gone forever, his career reduced to ashes. He worked at the foundation now as a custodian, mopping floors, taking out trash, performing penance in humble work. Some said it wasn't enough. Others said redemption had to start somewhere. Kelly thought both were true. On a warm spring afternoon, Kelly sat in her office reviewing consultation requests when Paulina knocked. "Someone here to see you." The young woman in reception was 25. Black, nervous energy radiating from her clasped hands. "Are you Kelly Liam?" "I am. How can I help you?" "My name is Jasmine Wright. I used to work for Stellar Biotech." Her voice trembled. 2 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with primary progressive polyneuropathy. They said I have less than a year. My doctor is pushing this expensive experimental treatment that Stellar manufactures." She met Kelly's eyes. "Something about my diagnosis feels wrong. I saw the news about what you did. I needed to talk to someone who would understand." Kelly felt it immediately. That familiar instinct, that discordant note humming beneath resignation. She glanced at Paulina in the doorway. Paulina's expression was knowing, almost amused. "Here we go again." Kelly sat beside Jasmine. "Let me tell you a story about a woman who was told she had 5 months to live." This time, they weren't alone. They had a network of physicians ready, a legal team on standby, media contacts alert. They were ready for Stellar Biotech, ready for whoever came next. The cycle continued, but so did the fight. From powerless to powerful, from victims to warriors, from rags to riches. Not financial wealth, but spiritual abundance. Transformation complete but ongoing, because one person's courage lights a spark, and sparks become flames, and flames become beacons that guide others through darkness. Paulina started as a file clerk who could barely afford dinner. Kelly wore shoes held together with tape. They had every reason to stay silent, stay safe, stay small. They didn't. And because they fought back. 47 people are alive today who should be dead. So here's my question for you. What injustice do you see that everyone else ignores? What voice do you have that needs to be heard? What spark are you carrying that could become someone else's beacon? Subscribe to this channel if you believe one person can change everything. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their power. Comment below. I will not stay silent, because saying it out loud is the first step. And remember, you don't need a medical degree to demand truth. You don't need wealth to fight corruption. You don't need permission to refuse injustice. You just need courage. And if Kelly and Paulina could find it in grief counseling sessions and fake diagnoses, you can find it too. The Gregory Atkins Foundation may be fictional, but the message is real. Never accept a terminal diagnosis without a second opinion from an independent physician. Trust your instincts. Advocate for yourself. And if you can't, find someone who will stand with you. This is how systems change, not with billion-dollar budgets or political power, but with people who see injustice and refuse to look away. Thank you for watching this story to the very end. Like this video if it moved you. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Drop a comment. What did this story teach you? Your engagement helps this reach more people who need it. Share this video, send it to your family, tag someone in healthcare, someone battling illness, someone who feels powerless. Because maybe your share will reach someone sitting in a doctor's office being told they're dying. Someone who needs to know, you can fight back and you can win. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop fighting for what's right. Your voice matters. You matter. Kelly sits with Jasmine, explaining the process. Independent evaluation at County General. Nathan's team standing by. Full workup within the week. Paulina brings tea, 3 cups, settling into the chair beside them. You're not alone, Kelly says simply. Jasmine's eyes fill with tears. I was so scared. I know what you thought, Paulina says gently. I thought the same thing. That I was powerless. That I had to accept what they told me. That fighting back would change nothing. She reaches across, takes Jasmine's hand. But here's what I learned. The system counts on your silence. It banks on your fear. And the moment you refuse to give them either, that's when everything changes. Kelly adds, we'll fight with you, every step. That's what we do now. Jasmine nods, wiping her eyes. What do we do first? Kelly smiles, the same smile she gave Paulina 2 years ago in another office, another lifetime. First, we get you the truth, and then we go to war.